catastrophe. So the problem is not, should we resign ourselves? The problem is that something will have to be done. I prefer not to think what type of society we are approaching, and we even know it in some sense, I claim. Who is we here? We are a collective ideological subject which is formed by Hollywood, and my God, Hollywood knows it. You remember all these big post-apocalyptic blockbusters that we have now, they all paint the same society which fits very much the image painted by Peter Sloterdijk in his book on the cupola of capitalism. You know, the privileged 20% living under a cupola, protected, the majority is outside. So we are all aware of the need of radical change. People often attack me. Why are you taking seriously Sloterdijk? He is a neo-Nazi, eugenic, whatever. Maybe, but read his book, I forgot which one of his latest books. He wonderfully, develops this idea. My God, he gets pretty radical. He claims that, wait a minute, read him what he claims. He claims that because of ecological catastrophe and other threats, the idea of sovereign nation state and capitalism is self-destructive. He says this. He says that if there is a lesson from ecology, it's that capitalism has this inbuilt tendency of ignoring as collateral damage these costs which you don't have to pay for to the environment and so on and so on. And quite correctly, he joins hands here, Sloterdijk of all people, with David Harvey and so on, who says that we cannot solve this problem as some left Keynesians dream, or feminist Keynesians, so that we include into the price of the commodity also all these collateral costs. I mean, I read some of their books, they are wonderful utopian reading. The idea is that they try to calculate, I don't know how many trillions of dollars, the cost of entire water supply of Earth. And then if you use water, it should be added to the price of a commodity. Or the idea is women's homework, non-paid, taking care of children, if they still do it and so on, they should also be given a salary for that. But I think this is precisely a model of utopia, of how you want to over-expand a model. No, the problem is to get out of capitalist logic. It's the only way. Of course, where do I absolutely not agree with Sloterdijk is that he just correctly concludes that, first, this state sovereignty logic, where the greatest heroic act is war, sacrifice yourself for your country and so on, and this capitalist logic of neglecting consequences and so on, that it's a matter of our survival to step out of this. Then, being Sloterdijk, he, of course, doesn't give any realistic or even minimally concrete plans, ideas even of how to do this, who will do it, how it will be done, and so on and so on. But I claim that I don't claim anything, basically. I don't have a clear idea here. But I absolutely claim that we are approaching a potential catastrophe. And maybe we are getting caught into some kind of a weird moral inertia. Look, you remember 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even more, Vietnam War. There was still, even for Iraq War, big demonstrations and so on. But today, much worse things are happening. Look at the ultra-tragedy of Aleppo today in Syria. Even out of egotist reasons, out of the meanest egotist reasons, we should be more mobilized. My God, we can see there hundreds of thousands of you new refugees in the making. No, we are just apathetic. Or look at all this Putin, Western Europe, United States madness. Are we aware that we are already entering the climate of the next world war? Our situation is not, as people claim, now we have new fascism, it's like Western Europe in the 1930s. No, I think a much better metaphor is the years before the Great War, before the First World War, where everyone was talking about the war, and then the big surprise was that the war really exploded. Why? Because everyone was talking about it, but nobody took it seriously. You know, I think, isn't this our deepest attitude towards, if you ask me, of the majority of us, attitude towards ecological threat? We are well aware there are dangers, but deeply existentially we cannot even imagine that, you know, that our daily, like you go out, my God, look, you know, now it's not, okay, but when it's spring, it's sun, birds are singing, what can change, and so on. It can. I think our situation today, again, is the situation before First World War. And from what I read in the media, are we aware what is going on? United States putting their battalions on the border of Russia. Russia already organized, my friends from Russia send me messages which are terrifying. They told me they already organized in the big cities exercises for nuclear attack and so on and so on. And again, this is the tragedy. The fact that you are not taking it seriously is, for me, precisely the fact that makes it realistic that it will happen. And if you ask me what's my solution, the only thing I will tell you is that I'm a pessimist. But maybe pessimists are the only happy people, you know, in a very stupid common sense. If you are a pessimist, then you are, since things are usually not so absolutely bad, then you are all the time in small details happily surprised, you know. For me, a pessimist is the only way to be a little bit glad. You see, nonetheless, this happened, that happened. That's the problem. I see today the situation as potentially revolutionary in the very traditional Marxist sense. Forces of production are developing in a way which makes them incompatible with our economic, social order, and so on. And if we don't do something, we will live in, you know, where from the movies, like Elysium, like Hunger Games, and so on and so on. And I think that here, again, I don't have time to develop it, I did it in my books, but I don't think the language we should speak is this language of open situation, or we can make a choice, and so on and so on. No, it's a closed, I'm a fatalist. Namely, I think that we have to accept that we are lost. There will be a war, but maybe we can postpone it, we can, you know, and that sometimes the only way to avoid the catastrophe is to accept it as unavoidable. Like my good friend Frank Ruda recently published a book in English, I think only in German, a defense of fatalism. And I'm ready to follow it, namely, in what sense? People like to say how the past is determined, the past is what it was, while the future is open. We have a choice. I claim more and more that exactly the opposite is true. The future is closed. It's our fate. We are caught in dynamic, while the past is open. As we learned from Benjamin, from I don't know who, we can change it. Of course, not in reality, but the point is not to say how we can act differently, but to change the past itself. We should take the lesson of Protestantism, of predestination, which is for me, as already my good friend Frederick Jameson emphasized, the most interesting notion for a Marxist from theology is the Protestant notion of predestination. Because it's the exact opposite of radical fatalism. Now we'll say predestination means everything is determined. Yes, everything is determined, but you don't know in what way, in what sense is determined. What is freedom, actual freedom? Imagine you are in a situation where you have to choose strawberry cake or cheesecake. That's freedom in a stupid sense, totally non-interesting. Remember yourself in a situation where somebody tells you it's predestined what you will do. You don't have a choice. But you don't know what is predestined. And then you sweat, you are afraid that you will not miss your destiny, And in this absolute anxiety not to miss the inevitable, you get close to true freedom. We must do something like that. Okay, I've spoken too much. I'm grateful